Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and before we get into the content of today's topic, if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can support me in getting the word out there about using the skills of dialectical behaviour therapy and the theories of personality that we get from schema therapy to effectively change those maladaptive and ineffective behaviours that are addictive, obsessive and compulsive. Achieving all of that revolves around developing our awareness for what it takes to live the life we want to live by being the person we want to be in the areas of life that are important to us according to our true, authentic values and beliefs. Which brings me nicely into what we're going to talk about in this video today. Let's open up a conversation that's intended to explore whether it's really true what they say in some recovery circles when they make the statement, acceptance is the answer. For those of you that don't know, I've been around the world of people using addictive, obsessive and compulsive coping mechanisms for a decent amount of time now. I'm particularly referring to my time on either side of the proverbial fence, both being someone who's lived the addictive lifestyle, then changing my behaviours, going back to school, so that I could learn how to use the combination of my own lived experience and the education I received to work with people who are trying to make similar behavioural changes themselves. And while I'm in no way a doctor of psychiatry or psychology, over the years my training and experience, both living the life and working in the field, has helped me to develop a strong belief that learning how to use the skills of DBT in the real world can provide exactly what it is we need to change our ineffective behavioural responses. In DBT, its creator Marsha Linehan has been quoted as saying many different variants of the statement, before we can change something, we first have to accept it for the way that it is.
Well, first of all, you can't change anything effectively if you don't radically accept it. Let's start with that.
In my own personal situation, it was roughly about 20 years ago that I actually started to give some level of legitimacy to the thing that every person around me was trying to get me to accept. Well, mainly those that had the capacity to put together a rational and logical thought process anyway, which didn't involve many of the people I had around me on a regular basis at that particular time of my life.
Hey.
Jesus Christ. Don't worry on me, I'm off to get back at me.
I had a problem with addiction. I was using substance and process to cope with pretty much everything in my life, and as a result, everyone who legitimately cared about me was pushing me towards the one thing that they thought would help me figure this shit out. The world of 12-step recovery. Now, whether you agree with the somewhat dogmatic approach of AA, NA, CA, or any of the other alphabet soups of anonymous groups out there is an irrelevant thing for us to get into right now. In fact, it's something that I am going to get into in more detail in a completely different video, so keep your eyes and ears open for that one when it drops. And here's a little hint, if you turn on those notifications, it's going to help you to do that. What is important for us to look at right now is that in the world of Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, which is where I originally landed in the early days of my journey, the entire philosophy revolves around the guidance we get from what's commonly called the Big Book. This Bible of 12-step recovery, originally written in the late 1930s, provides the steps we need to take if we want to live a sober life. And whenever we might find ourselves questioning this philosophy and we push back against the message in any way, our sponsor or guide within the program often steers us back to the pages of the Big Book to seek the answers we're looking for. In my case, when what I would later come to know as the entitled child that was existing within my personality was active in my system, I'd push back against being told what to do.
No, you can't tell me what to do. No, that's not fair. It's not fair that you're telling me what to do. No, that's not fair. I can do what I want to do. I don't have to do what you want me to do. I don't have to do that. I can do what I want to do. It's not fair.
And as I said before, this was when I'd get my guidance to immerse myself back in the Big Book, and in particular by reading a specific chapter that would show me the way. I'd hear it quoted to me in meetings, indirectly of course. This was where I first came across the statement, acceptance is the answer. But is this actually true? The word acceptance is a word that's thrown around all the time in the circles of recovery and any kind of behaviour change program that's out there. Whenever there's a problem that shows up, we're told, well, you just have to accept it for the way that it is. And this is usually where we come across a bit of an issue, a pushback in our system, typically from a part of our personality that simply doesn't want to accept. For me, as it seems to be for many people that I've come across over the years, this wasn't because of a lack of desire to accept, it was simply because I didn't know how to do it or what it was that I was supposed to be accepting. A lack of acceptance basically means that we're stuck in behaviours that are trying to change the way things are or the way things have played out in the past. And this is particularly problematic because these are generally things that are way outside of our control. In essence, we want something we can't have and we're fighting with the way things are. It's a fact that we can't change things that have happened in the past. This just goes against the laws of time and physics. We also have to come to terms with the fact that we have no real say in the way other people see the world, the way they behave, or even the way that they see us if they're not open to looking at things from a different point of view. So when we're told to accept, what is it that we're trying to accept and how are we supposed to accept it? In the world of 12 Step to practice acceptance, I was told to pray to my higher power and attend more meetings to find the answer I was looking for. But in all honesty, even though this does work for some people, it just didn't seem to work for me. In dialectical behaviour therapy, we start off with acceptance by using the skill called radical acceptance, which, when I learned how to use it, helped me in the short term by separating my story about the situation from the facts. Radical acceptance is all about accepting the moment as it is, that the facts are the facts, and radically accepting that there's something that we want that we can't have, and it's basically not the catastrophe that we think it is that we can't have it.
You have to radically accept that you want something you don't have and it's not a catastrophe.
It's about removing the story, because accepting the facts about the situation was a hell of a lot easier for me to do in the moment than it was for me to try and work my way out of my own particular maladaptive and ineffective story. The practice of radical acceptance is a really amazing skill to learn, but it does take practice. If you want to know more about radical acceptance, because that's not what we're going to talk about today, take a look at the video I have on this subject. I'll leave a link in the description below. The only problem that I personally found with radical acceptance in actuality was that over time my story kept coming up over and over again, time after time after time. And radically accepting something this way became extremely tiring for me after a while. So I started to explore what it means to accept my story about the situation too, which led me into looking things from a more long-term perspective.
Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean, Basil?
Long-term acceptance tends to take us in a bit of a different direction though, and in order to understand what it looks like to work through this process, I found that I had to call not only on the skills of DBT, but also on the awareness I'd built for the schemas in my system. And before we get into that, I want to start off by just going over the fact that the process of long-term acceptance can take a little bit of time to figure out and a hell of a lot of internal work. It involves self-analysis and self-exploration through the use of mode journaling, a solid understanding of our own internal narrative, and a capacity to sit with emotional distress that allows us to work with the uncomfortable emotional experiences we have rather than just running away from them at the first sign of any problem. Long-term acceptance means leaning into the foundation we've built for living the life we want to live. It means practicing the skills of mindfulness and distress tolerance that we get from DBT, so we can go through the process from a space of wise mind. You know, that internal state that's guided by the light of self-energy that we get from living a values-based life. Going through the process of long-term acceptance means following certain steps, which, when completed effectively, lead us to a place where we can let go of whatever the thing is that we're rigidly holding on to. This means we can actually move forward with our lives instead of staying stuck in the suffering we experience from the fight that comes with this rigidity. Following is a list of the steps that we take to move through the process of long-term acceptance. In this work, compassion is defined as the capacity to set aside our judgments so we can be what we need to be for the person or part in the situation we're working with. Whether the compassion is for someone else or, as I said before, for a part of our own personality that's acted out in a way that doesn't line up with living the life we want to live. Compassion is developed in the exact same way. Notice the judgment and set it aside so we can witness what happened from an objective point of view. Having the capability to set our judgments aside means first being able to notice them, because basically if we can't notice our judgments, then how the hell are we supposed to set them aside?
No shit, Sherlock!
This means working with our own internal critics. Understanding their language so we can reflect on their presence.
You don't fit in with these people. You've never fitted in with these people. These people don't get you. They don't understand you. They've never understood you. You're a loser.
Which also means knowing what our stories are. What's the schema we're holding on to? You know, that one that's generating the judgment being pushed on us through our own internal narrative that's coming from those demanding and punitive critics.
He's going to fire you. You need to quit before he fires you. You need to end this so he doesn't make you look like a fool. End it. Quit. Quit your job right now. Do it. You know what? You. This job isn't worth the hassle that you keep giving me. I'm done with this. It's an absolute joke. You and your job. I'm out of here. Don't bother calling me, begging me to change my mind either. I'm never coming back. This is over.
This is where the rigidity comes from. The absolute, all or nothing point of view that in this moment is simply just a fact. It has to be. How can it be any other way? Building our capability to set the judgment aside takes time and work. So take a look at the videos and worksheets available on the subject of working with our own internal critics, because it's an important and necessary aspect in the work of acceptance. Recognize the language and acknowledge that the critic is present. Validate the reasons why it does what it does, and then educate it on what our objective is so we can ask it to soften off the judgment, to step back from the guilt and shame that it's activating. This is all wrapped up in our use of what's called the RAAVEN exercise, which is purely and simply intended to highlight the language that's needed to develop our new and compassionate internal narrative. Empathy means to understand what a person is going through, to know what it is that they're feeling. This is the same if we're practicing empathy for others as it is for a part of our own personality. Empathy also involves us exploring the current and often really dominant story, so we can open up the possibility of what we know as a dialectical perspective, recognizing that there are many different reasons something happened the way that it did. When we're trapped in a rigid point of view, the other aspects of this dialectical perspective are simply not a part of our thinking. We're unable to see any other possibility than what's present in the current state of mind. Setting aside our judgments, basically practicing compassion, helps us to achieve this dialectical perspective. Stepping away from the rigid point of view that the story has us thinking is simply just a fact, without any question at all. Empathy without judgment means we can actually start to see things in a new light from an objective point of view. It means exploring the reasons something might have happened that may not line up with our original perspective. This also means finding new reasons and being open to their existence. Journaling and brainstorming with others can help us to achieve this outcome. Exploring different possibilities through writing and talking opens us up to different points of view and leads to the possibility of actually letting go. Remember, just because we feel something doesn't mean it's a fact. It also doesn't mean it's not a fact either. So when we notice our system has entered into distress, we get curious, definitely not judgmental, to explore the possibility of a different point of view, using what we've talked about before with empathy and compassion to activate this curiosity. Now that we've created a dialectical perspective, it leads us into the step that often causes people problems, including myself. The part of the process for long-term acceptance that causes our system to push back, practicing the art of forgiveness. And there's usually a really good reason this activates the aforementioned pushback within our personality system. Forgiveness means letting go of the judgment completely, not just setting it aside. We've explored multiple reasons why things might have happened, and we've found that dialectical perspective. We're sitting in a space of wise mind, but there might be a part of you that just won't let go, regardless of what you now see. The reason for this is often protection. The narrative in our system has us truly believing that if we let go of this particular judgment, it opens us up for the same to happen again. So therefore, we need to hold on to this judgment as a reminder, in essence, to keep us safe. And if this is the case for you, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It drives me nuts when I hear people being made to feel guilty because they don't want to let go of a particular judgment when it's clearly in their system with the intention of keeping them safe. After all, safety is one of the 5 core values, so it's important that we have it in place. When you notice a judgment of this kind being held by a particular part within your personality system, then maybe there's something else that we need to work on forgiving, so we can start to move forward in our life. Maybe the other person, the one that's done us wrong, is not the one we actually need to forgive at all. And it's usually the case that if we're struggling to let go, the one we actually need to forgive is ourselves. And this is often for allowing the situation to happen in the first place. This type of judgment is filled with what we call a psychological filter of hindsight bias, dominated by statements like, you should have known better, you shouldn't have let this happen, and you should have seen it coming. Working through the dominant story that's connected to this filter is often the aspect of forgiveness that leads us to the acceptance we seek. After all, if we can't forgive ourselves for the things we've said or done, then how do we expect to move forward?
True that.
If you're struggling with acceptance and you just can't seem to let go, try exploring the story a little bit deeper to see if you can establish who it is you might actually need to forgive. In actuality, when we look at where we started this video out, acceptance really is the answer. The problem for me was not in the answer, it was in the way I was asking the question in the first place. Guys, I hope this video gave you some insight for what it takes to go through the process of long-term acceptance. If you want to know more, come join the conversation in the free online meetings that I facilitate each week on Zoom. I'll leave a link to the page containing more information about these groups in the description below. Thanks for watching, hope to see you again soon. Take care, be safe and be well.